This is what is wrong, and here's what we're trying to do it better.
So I'm very excited about the Meet the Editor segment that we are starting to do because I think understanding and getting an insight into the editorial process at the Polis project is something that readers and audience would kind of be quite interested in. But first of all, Madhuri, just tell us who you are actually at the Polis project.
Um, well, thanks, Meenakshi, for doing this. I think it's very gratifying to know that people might be interested in our little shenanigans behind the scenes.
Yeah.
Um, but hi, everyone. My name is Madhuri Shastri, and I'm the culture editor at the Polis Project, where we've recently launched a new culture section. I'm also a culture and politics writer, and I'm based in New York and have focused a lot on, the diaspora, the Indian diaspora in particular, in my work. And I also co-host a podcast with Suchitra Vijayan, the founder of Polis Project, and Bhakti Shingarpure, the founder of Warscapes and Radical Book. Podcast is called It's Not You, It's the Media.
So I'm gonna first sort of ask you to tell us a little bit about why culture, why a culture section at the Polis Project at this stage.
Basically, the culture section is born out of this belief that culture is political.
Hmm.
At the Polis Project, we have prioritized in depth political reporting, centering marginalized voices. And this is something that we've wanted to continue to do in the culture section as well. Culture has always been such a fertile field for the creation and establishment of ideas and philosophy. Think about any book you read or any film that you have watched or a piece of art that you engage with that has really influenced who you are at your core. It is where political thought and imagination are ignited and where the core of your beliefs and personhood is found and formed. We've seen how, since time immemorial, right wing governments and fascists have weaponized culture spaces
Hmm.
to disseminate propaganda, right? So, another motivation for our endeavor was to take back this power. Like, you don't get to make that propaganda. We
Hmm.
will put the politics back into art, and we will be the ones telling you what is fun to read, what is important to read. And this was also motivated by the sort of very binary way that culture writing has come to exist in the modern literary landscape, where it's either very gossipy and time pass, or there's a lot of writing which is considered just too political to be culture. So
Hmm.
these are all the sort of pre-held assumptions that we are fighting back up against, and we want to be the ones who have long, had to subscribe to a Western or imperialist ideology of what is cool and what is taste, and take that back and
Hmm.
reframe it and upend all the rules, but just bring the politics to culture where it belongs.
Yeah, no, I am super curious about what goes on with an editorial process. And so I know there was a newsletter that has already gone out, which of course Madhuri sends one out towards the end of the month. So you can subscribe to our Substack and you'll receive it. So nice little plug-in. But give us a bit of like an insight, like what makes a piece really that it just packs that punch, and then maybe just tell us a little bit more about some of the pieces that have come out, maybe something that's in the pipeline.
That's a very good question, Meenakshi. A lot
Yeah.
of commissioning and picking what gets published is quite instinctive, and it is informed very much by our political ideology and our view of the world. And a simple example to give you here is that we are just, as Suchitra likes to say, irreverent of power.
Hmm.
We are anti Zionist, and the media is largely not. So when we
Yeah.
have pieces that come in that exhibit critical engagement with the systems of power. Palestinian writers who have been relegated to the margins in the mainstream media, Palestinian artwork or any artwork from the quote global south that has not been fetishized or marginalized. This is what we are interested in. Films that have an anti capitalist messaging, for example. The other thing that we're looking for, in addition to sort of marginalized voices, the less heard of films with solid messaging, great political messaging, or the books that aren't centered in mainstream media, is just an interesting take on anything that is cultural. I know this is a very wide sort of way to phrase this, but by this I mean there's a piece that is coming out which is about how two musicians recorded music from a village in Madhya Pradesh, folk music, and they converted a mud hut into a recording studio, which was really interesting to read about because it's not something I'm very familiar with, but it was interesting information on how music is produced. And there was this other detail that the writer included, the writer is Akil Sood, on how it was for these two musicians who are trained in and use Western instruments to record with the local musicians who all have different instruments that were tuned to the frequency of a harmonium, but out of tune with the Western instruments, which are tuned differently.
Wow.
So, how did
Okay.
they make it work? And so, it was just going beyond just, oh, this is an album. And it told you so much more about the literal village that went into making the album. The album is called Nimard. So, these are two examples of pieces that both engage very deeply and, politically with film and music. Then there was a very popular piece that we published by Bhakti Shingarpure on Mindy Kaling. And that piece was so fascinating was because it was a proper examination of this unspoken thing that so many of us feel. Which there's something about the her shows which is off. When Bhakti was mentioning doing this piece, so many people would tell her like, "I've been waiting to read more about Mindy." So it is that je ne sais quoi. Like, what is this? With this person's contributions, what is it about this person that is making us curious? And Bhakti really unpacked how Mindy Kaling's projects, from the Mindy Project to Never Have I Ever and The Sex Lives of College Girls, has created a very problematic stereotype of the Indian American woman. And she contextualized it very, very wonderfully at that time. And it was this really thoughtful, critical engagement with Mindy's work, contextualizing it within the political reality that we were existing in, with a brown and black woman being nominated or not nominated. So it's not, when I say critical, I don't mean we are interested in takedowns, but I do mean we are not interested in fawning. By all means, if there's something that you love and there is a reason that you love it, we would love to hear that. But we are really interested in a critical engagement of like kind of scratching the surface. Like, what lies beneath? What is this thing really trying to say? What is she really doing? What is the effect of this? Culture is where political thought and ideology is created. So,
Yeah.
what is that thing that we're doing?
I actually have like this other question related to that, because we always talk about, the writer, or like the kind of piece that we want to put out. But what's really interesting for me is, who is the person who reads this? Like, in a sense, we've always thought of the Polis Project as having, an audience and a viewership that's based in South Asia and in India. And then I think with the culture section, there's also been this sort of grappling with this kind of identity politics, and
Yes.
how that's falling apart. And so there is a South Asian diaspora that's also sort of sensing and being on the same page as, say, like, the way that Bhakti is unpacking the Mindy Kaling effect. It's interesting. So I feel like, I mean, I don't know, do you feel like you're also shaping a viewership in a way, because we're going to then literally also re-look at our politics and re-look
Yeah.
at identity politics? Like, is that like an ambition?
If you come to one of our pieces and you think about something differently, or it makes you go like, like, I guess I never thought about that before in this particular way, that would have been a great marker of success. There was a review about Singham, and you have your trolls, and you have, people who come and tell you to just, why are you doing this? Like, why can't you focus on, white people? And, you are going to get those people. But it does say to me more about those readers than it does about the piece. It's like, okay, like, it gives me a greater insight into who you are. So in that way too, I guess it is, there is something that's achieved in terms of a new viewership. I mean, I think these cultural, with the advent of OTT platforms and Netflix and everything, the hyper sort of constant availability of culture is just a fact of life, and I don't think any longer it needs to be that only a person who sees themselves represented in these shows needs to be the one who talks about it, although that is a plus, of course. So there is this audience that I think does exist all over the world, that is enjoying and appreciating art and culture from around the world as much as they can. And these are the people that we want to speak to. These are the people that we consider our audience as well. This is the type of audience that we are looking to cultivate, and they
Mm.
exist.
So I want you to talk a little bit more about It's Not You, It's the Media, which is the podcast produced by the Polis Projects, and you co-host that with Suchitra and Bhakti, and yeah, I mean, it's really been amazing to see a lot of what a lot of people, like you said, we're thinking about it, we exist as an audience, and now it's like, you're kind of almost saying what's been on people's minds, especially right now. You're focused on sort of like American media, and I hope you'll come and start taking down Indian media as well soon. But what has that experience so far been with the podcast, and why should someone watch that while reading the culture section and the politics? Like, what is It's Not You? Where does it sit?
That's a really, really interesting question.
Mm,
As to where it sits, I think it works really well in tandem with the
mm-hmm,
culture section, or even with the politics session, or generally what Polis and Radical Books are trying to do. Because the
mm,
podcast is about media gaslighting and
mm,
unpacking the ways in which the media is gaslighting you. And
mm-hmm,
it's not, we focus on the media, but literary institutions, magazines, and all of these media and media adjacent institutions are also very much complicit in the gaslighting. So, for
mm,
example, to go back to your question of audience, you would think that an audience for someone who's interested in these niche things don't really exist, or they're always dismissed as too niche. But the truth is that we do exist. It's
yeah.
just that we have been dismissed. So we are sort of trying to remedy a gaslighting with the culture section.
Mm-hmm,
And podcast exposes the myriad ways in which the media gaslights. So it's a media indictment essentially at its core.
mm, mm.
And the corrective is essentially Police Project.
Yeah.
Like, the experience of recording it has been really cathartic because we are just living through this year and more of a live streamed genocide that has been denied, repeatedly denied by the media. We've seen Palestinians being evaporated literally by these bombs,
Yeah.
mass graves, the death of so many children, and we see the media manufacturing consent for this. We see the media dehumanizing Palestinians more and more and more and more. We see in American politics a clampdown on free speech. Recently, this
Mm,
anti-Semitism definition has been signed. So,
yeah.
universities, any place basically in America have now become really, um, it's impossible to really speak out. And the catharsis, it has felt the just like the most crazy making kind of time, because you
Mm,
read it and you think like, what is wrong with me? And this podcast was so brilliantly named by Bhakti because it just captures it. It's like, it's not you, it's them. And so we
mm,
really want to, um coming together to do it has been an act of community where, it has been a place for us to process and really sort of unpack this. It's like a sanity check,
yeah.
like, it's really, have you seen this? And our attempt to tell people not only to expose the media and the systems of power, but to also call in the people who are feeling like, is it me? What's going on? Like, there's something off here. And these people exist. They
Yeah.
know that something is off. I think it has really cemented how power works and cover all aspects of media reporting, and
Yeah.
gaslighting, from how they report unethically on sexual violence, to the genocide, to how book reviews can influence society, what happens when the media tries to be woke. And it is
Mm-hmm,
essentially to tell you that this is a rotten institution and where can you look to find
mm-hmm.
solid media and solid reporting. So it very much does function in my mind as this de-gaslighting, ungaslighting, relearning, recentering, and just this attempt to take back the power and the narrative. Like, we
Mm-hmm.
need to just accept that we are no longer niche, we are the mainstream. And so that's how we're
Yeah.
going to act.
Great. So Madhuri, like, what should our viewers look forward to from the culture section, including, of course, the newsletter that comes out at the end of the month?
Yeah. Well, there's a lot to look forward to. I don't want to give away too much, but more and better of the same. I'd like to say, more reviews of books, film, art that fall through the cracks, that don't, reach the veneer of the imprimatur of like importance that is bestowed on it by mainstream
Mm-hmm.
media. We have interviews from England to India to Algeria to Sudan with authors from
Oh
all of
wow.
these regions. We have, as usual, our columnist Ruby Hamad writes from
Mm.
Australia, her column Reorient, which we publish every month. We have a feature on olive trees in Palestine.
Mm.
We have a feature, as I said, on music, on art, anything and everything that you could possibly imagine, but we will give you an interesting way to look at it and introduce you to interesting people doing amazing work that you will not hear about anywhere else. We truly have
Yeah.
a global footprint, so we are really
Yes.
excited. And as for our newsletter, yes, it goes out
Mm-hmm.
every month on Substack. So please subscribe to it to receive these
Yes.
pieces in your inbox, or a roundup of the pieces in
Mm-hmm.
your inbox at the end of every month. And of course, Polis Project is a nonprofit. And if you like the work that we do and you appreciate the importance of this type of work, especially at a time like this, please do consider a donation. We don't have any corporate sponsors or any corporate backers, so every little bit goes a long way.
Thank you so much, Madhuri. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Meenakshi. This was fun.
Yeah.